Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. It's Wednesday, November 14th, 2012. I'm David Knight, and here are our top stories.
Tonight on the Infowars Nightly News, new photographs prove that the government can't even feed itself. What will you do when FEMA steals your rations? Then, the Petraeus scandal proves that even the CIA can't hide from the peeping Tom of Big Brother. And companies announce mass layoffs as affordable care is already costing the economy big. All that and more coming up on the Infowars Nightly News.
Well, if the FBI doesn't respect the rights and the privacy of the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, do you think they're respecting your rights and your privacy? Remember, we have this little thing called the law, and it lays out the due process for search warrants. And Andrew Napolitano had this to say on Fox News about that.
In order for the FBI to be reading the emails of the chief spy of the United States, the director of the CIA, they would either need a search warrant from a federal judge, or they'd have to write their own search warrant under the Patriot Act, in which case they'd have to satisfy themselves that the general was involved in terrorist activity.
Now, do you understand that? Basically, for the longest period of time, up until just recently, until the Patriot Act passed, you could not tap somebody's private conversation without going before a judge and presenting a reason why you're going to do it, and specifically saying where you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, that sort of thing, getting a judge to give you a search warrant. Now, with the Patriot Act, that has been relaxed so that an FBI agent could basically they could write their own search warrants without going before a judge, but only if they believe that the subject is engaged in terrorism. Now, some of us may believe that the CIA is engaged in terrorism with the drone wars and with kill lists and that sort of thing, but I don't think that was what the FBI was looking at. So that leaves us with a third possibility, and that is that they basically just violated the law in a criminal way. And what we see here in this article, Paul Joseph Watson kind of breaks it down for us. Petraeus scandal proves email is being surveilled. What we see here is that there's, some real issues, some real questions that need to be asked of FBI Director Mueller. And Steve Shenk said that yesterday. He believed that there needed to be a thorough investigation of Mueller, not just of this affair with Petraeus. We need to find out why the FBI is no longer paying any attention to legal and due process. I mean, do we have some kind of a rivalry going on here between two criminal gangs, the FBI and the CIA, kind of like there was between the SS and the Gestapo? We'll have to see about that. Now, look at this next article here. We've got a photo that shows Sandy volunteers actually feeding FEMA workers. That's right. Take a look at this picture. We've got FEMA workers it's actually Occupy Sandy, an offshoot of the Occupy Wall Street movement. They're feeding the FEMA workers. We've got government workers who can't even provide their own food, and they're not doing a very good job of getting things in order in New York and New Jersey either. There's a lot of complaints still. There's power that is out. People are cold. They're hungry, without power. After weeks after the storm, Staten Island Borough President James Molinaro slammed the Red Cross, highlighting how their executives are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, yet they've never set foot on the front lines of this disaster. So, take care of yourself, because the government is not going to do it for you. Now, if the government can't provide its own food in a disaster, still, the Chicago godfather, Rahm Emanuel, is kind of channeling Bloomberg now, and he's starting to tell people what they can have in vending machines in Chicago. This article, Rahm cracks down on Chicago vending machines. Rahm Emanuel said Wednesday that he's cracking down on the caloric content of vending machines in city buildings, and he plans to replace them all with healthy vending by next year. Now, that's great. We all like healthy food. But one of the stipulations that he's got here is that healthier food can't be pricier than higher calorie counterparts. Well, it takes a little bit more to produce apples than it does to produce Cheetos. But they're going to mandate that to people. And also, they're going to have an announcement on the same day. Chicago Public School Board is preparing to vote on a new healthy snack and beverage policy that would ban pop, sports drinks, and energy drinks, as well as whole milk during school hours. So yeah, we can all agree that soda pop is not very good, but whole milk is going to be banned as well. We also have another familiar story. A man has been tasered by the police as he is trying to keep his house from catching on fire. Daniel Jensen wasn't running from the law. He was just trying to protect his home from burning up. Yet Pinellas Park Police in Tampa tasered him in the process. And they've got a lawsuit now going against the police. He was woken up by his wife at 6 o'clock in the morning, told that the house next door was on fire. He went over to do what he could and then realized that there was nobody home. So the next thing he was concerned about was the fire spreading to his house. So he made sure that everybody in his house was out. And as he saw the flames starting to spread to the roof of his house, he was training his hose on it because the police were there, but the fire department was not there yet. And the policeman told him to get back, but you know, your instinct is to try to keep your house from burning. And without warning, they tasered him. And as he described it, he says, "All I remember is laying in water, being electrocuted for saving my home." We need to do something, I think, about this almost indiscriminate use of tasers that's going on. You know, it's happening regularly. Every week there's multiple cases of the police using tasers for just the most minor things, even using them on children. But that's what's happening in our society here. American Airlines employee was put on a no-fly list. This is similar to the story that we had with Wade Hicks a few weeks ago. If you remember, Wade Hicks was flying and going to Hawaii, going to Japan, and stopped in Hawaii. He was visiting his wife who was in the military, and then halfway through the journey, when he stopped in Hawaii, he found that he was on a no-fly list. They removed him from the plane, and he was stranded there for 5 days at his own expense. Now, he contacted us, and after a few days, he was allowed to fly, and he asked why he was put on the no-fly list the entire time, but of course he was stonewalled. The same thing happened to this fellow in Florida. This was South Florida, and it was picked up by the local news station there. Basically, this guy was working for American Airlines and had worked for them for several years. He had even traveled extensively abroad. He traveled in July, and then in August he was told that he was on a no-fly list. And for 6 weeks, he tried to get an answer from the government, but they wouldn't give him an answer. Now, in his case, he was actually suspended from his job because he worked for American Airlines, and they would not allow somebody to work the gate that was on the no-fly list. The restriction only got lifted when he got the local news station to report on it. Kind of similar to what happened with Wade Hicks. We don't know if it was because we reported on it or if it was because of contacts within the military, but it was only because he made a lot of noise that he got off the list. We think he's off the list. We don't really know. They won't really tell you if you're on the list, just like they won't tell you what they've put you on the list for. And in this fellow's case, as soon as NBC6 reported on the story, 5 days later, they removed him from the list. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Homeland Security admitted that only 1% of the people who are on the list are actually real terrorists. That means that 99% of the people are basically being punished in absentia. They've been tried, they've been charged, they've been tried in absentia, and they've been put on a list, which is a punishment. And they're never even told about it until they try to fly. And then when you try to follow up with them, this fellow in Florida actually got the same thing that Wade Hicks got. And Wade Hicks just sent us this letter. Can we get a document cam on this? Got a letter from him that this is from Homeland Security. And basically what they're telling him is that they've gone through the Traveler Redress Inquiry Program. They got a nice little acronym for that called TRIP. And they said they take requests for redress seriously. We understand the inconveniences that additional inspections may cause, but there's actually no redress here at all. Redress means that you get a remedy, that you get something from it. Basically, all they're doing is telling him that they've gone through and looked at other agencies, and they're going to relieve him from the burden of seeking redress on an agency-by-agency basis. And they're going to relieve him by telling him, we're not going to tell you anything. So they don't really give him any explanation. They don't give him any redress. They just say, don't worry about going to all these other agencies. We've gone to them, and we're not going to tell you anything. It says, DHS has researched and completed our review of your case. Security procedures and legal concerns mandate that we can neither confirm nor deny any information about you, which may be within federal watch lists, or reveal any law enforcement sensitive information. So there you go. They're not going to tell you why you were put on. And in his case, they don't really even make it clear. This is kind of a form letter, and I noticed in the NBC6 report that the fellow there, Montano, Montano was his name, he actually got the same form list. And basically what they tell you is they give you a control number, and you can take that number with you in case you run into any difficulty flying. But it appears that they have two different subsections, and it appears that when you're traveling by air to or within the United States, you should have this control number, but of course you don't need it when you're traveling abroad, because other countries don't do this kind of thing to their citizens when you're traveling abroad. It's only when you're coming in or out of America that you need to worry about these types of things. Well, it looks like the only flying that 99% of the people who are on the no-fly list will be doing is in cyberspace. Black Ops 2 was just released, and we've got a special report from Jakari Jackson and Melissa Melton. Let's go to that right now.
I'm Melissa Melton reporting for Infowars Nightly News. We're here at the Black Ops 2 premiere, and we hope to...
If you've been following Infowars over the past several weeks, you've seen we published articles concerning the public perception of drones. Let's find out what these gamers have to say.
What's like the new coolest thing about this game?
Probably all the new zombies.
I love zombies. The gameplay on zombies.
It's got to be the zombies.
There's going to be zombies in it.
The zombies are back. I love playing zombies.
My reasoning for being here tonight can be summed up in one word: zombies.
Nazi zombies.
Playing zombies again.
Everybody loves zombies. What is it about zombies?
It's just fun.
Have you ever heard that the military actually likes to use games like this sometimes to recruit people?
We've heard the story of a 19-year-old who was actually offered a job by the military as a drone pilot because he got a top score.
So they monitor that?
Yes, they do.
When they come knock on your door, I'm Colonel so-and-so, I want to give you a job, would you take it?
I'm gonna have to.
If I could do that, I'll do that today if I could, but not to hurt anybody.
I would love the opportunity.
No, I couldn't do it. I'm not finna hurt America like that.
Man, if I get a job like that, hell, yeah, let's do it. I'm good. Shoot, who I got to kill?
What do you think about drone use in the real world? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's actually pretty good. I mean, it keeps our troops safe.
Did you know in Pakistan about 80% of the people killed by drones were non-combatants, pretty much civilians?
No, I did not know that.
Okay.
That's not a good news, though.
I think any level of civilian casualties is unacceptable.
Our military should be able to be, more accurate.
Damn, I believe it.
You believe it?
I believe it.
You think
It's
that's
pretty messed up?
They're set to release 30,000 drones here over American skies to surveil us, and yes, they are.
Well, I think it's completely unnecessary. I don't see how it's going to make us safer.
That's certainly scary.
It's actually kind of scary sounding.
I think it's wrong too. Of course I do. Of course I do. But the government's not right. They do a lot of things we don't like.
I don't see any real problem with drones surveying us per se, because it gives us this kind of sense of security. And I don't necessarily think they're going to be spying in our backyards. And even if they are, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Man, come do it. Shoot. Hell, we get hit, we get hit.
Like, that'd be kind of cool just as, like, security, defense, whatever. But, like, I don't know, someone hacks into them.
It could be just like in Black Ops 2, and they could all turn against us and kill us.
Did you know the University of Texas has actually been able to hack a drone using about $1,000 worth of materials?
Ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Actually, no, I have not heard of that.
That's the main concern, if some kids at, like, UT could do that. I mean, terrorists and stuff. Like, what about that?
Now, do you plan to go to school or work tomorrow?
Man, I ain't even gonna go to work. I'm just gonna play my game. That's it.
And work, I don't work tomorrow.
I do, but I'm definitely going to sleep in.
Yeah, I have class. I have to go.
Okay, so you're not gonna stay up all night?
I'm gonna stay up all night.
Did you know one of the games they have tonight is a care package that actually comes with a mini drone?
Yes, I was tempted to get that, but it wasn't quite in my price range, so.
Some critics say that games like this desensitize people to the real, harsh realities of war. What do you say to those critics?
I would have to say that their critiques are absolutely 100% correct. We have absolutely become desensitized to vile actions.
We're outside GameStop about to pick up our Black Ops 2 care package in just mere moments. The care package comes with its very own drone, a real remote control drone that you can fly around. Now, you've heard us at Infowars talk about drones several times, and we basically came to the conclusion that if Big Brother can fly drones on us, we are going to fly drones on them. That's why we have #DroneMob. You can follow us on Twitter to let Big Brother know that, hey, if you're going to keep flying drones on us, we will fly drones on you. #DroneMob for more details.
So we all drones one way or another.
Well, great report, Jakari and Melissa. Maybe people can use video games to keep themselves busy and take out their frustration as they lose their jobs. Melissa Melton also wrote a story about Obamacare bankrupting businesses and families even before it's implemented. 20 new or raised taxes. And the Congressional Budget Office Director has said that the Affordable Health Care Act is going to cost this country 800,000 jobs. I don't know if we can afford to lose another 800,000 jobs, but it's going to have a lot of other types of effects on us, too. Papa John's CEO has said that it's going to cause them to raise prices. Applebee's owner says that they're going to have a hiring freeze and they're going to stop building new restaurants. McDonald's, even though they've had an Obamacare waiver, is going to have higher menu prices. In North Carolina, students there in college are going to now pay double for their insurance. And Walmart is going to have to raise their health insurance premiums by 36%. And a lot of businesses are going to address this by changing the definition. The definition of a full-time employee has changed to 30-hour work week. And so they're going to start reducing the number of hours. And Olive Garden, Red Lobster, Longhorn Steakhouse, and others, including Kroger, have all said that they're going to start reducing the number of hours that people work. So, you know, and it's not just limited to retail chains. It's not just limited to unemployment, to shorter hours, to lost jobs. It's also doctors. In a study of more than 1,300 doctors, a survey said that 84% of them feel that America's medical profession is in decline, and 60% of them had a negative view of America's health care future under Obamacare. Well, we've had a couple of, there's been a lot of medical marijuana has been in the news with ballot initiatives, as well as legalization of marijuana for the first time a week ago in the elections. Colorado and Washington both legalized marijuana. Now, Rhode Island and Maine are going to have ballot initiatives, just like the ones that passed this last week in Colorado and Washington State. And we've got an interview with a fellow who helped to get that through in Colorado. His name is Brian Vincente. He's with Sensible Colorado, and he's going to talk to us about the issues that are going to come to play now that the Colorado state law contradicts the federal law. So that's going to be interesting to see how that develops. We've also got an interview with James Gierach, and he's with LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And he was a federal prosecutor for quite some time in the war on drugs, and he didn't get corrupted by it like a lot of police and prosecutors. Instead, he has kept his integrity, and he's telling people exactly what's going on in the war on drugs. You want to stick around for those two interviews. We're going to go to a break, and after the break, we're going to be back with Alex Jones and Steve Shenk.
Insider billionaire investors like George Soros and John Paulson have recently made massive moves into gold, purchasing what Bloomberg News described as gold hoards. Soros alone doubled his holdings in a single day. Russia's Vladimir Putin has doubled down on gold, increasing the country's holdings by over 100%. With $1.8 trillion under management, the bond king Bill Gross, the world's preeminent bond fund manager at PIMCO, has warned investors of the dangers of QE3 and inflation. And what's he betting on? You guessed it, gold. Friends, this is Alex Jones for MidasResources.com. For more than 15 years, I have exclusively used Midas Resources for all my precious metal needs. Whether it's bullion or collectibles you're looking for, Midas Resources is simply the best. I own my gold as a hedge against inflation. This Federal Reserve fiat currency could go the way of the Deutschmark and the Weimar Republic anytime. In these historically dangerous times, it makes sense to physically hold gold and silver. Midas already has some of the best deals in the industry. But if you give them a call and mention the radio special, they will give you a list of the day's super specials. Midas brokers are standing by to answer all your questions at 800-686-2237. They also have a lot of informative free literature Monitor, explaining the opportunities and risk of holding precious metals. They are ready to answer your questions at 800-686-2237. Again, that's 800-686-2237.
As we saw in Katrina, and as we are watching now in New York and New Jersey, the federal government can't and won't help you in a crisis. FEMA ran out of water and MREs in days. Electricity is still off to over 1 million people. The Red Cross, who is quick to beg for money, is now slow to react. Don't put it off any longer. Get prepared today. The Infowars shop is the largest distributor of ProPure water filter systems. And now, get 15% off your ProPure order with the promo code WATER15. While you're on InfoWarsShop.com, check out these other great preparedness items. The Aquapod kit lets you store up to 65 gallons of water in your bathtub. The Pocket Socket provides you with manual electricity for small electronics like your cell phone. The Life Straw is great for your bug-out bag. And check out our complete line of Interfood products for great tasting and nutritionally dense foods that have a great shelf life. If you are looking to secure your home in a crisis, you can order Strategic Relocations, the film, a great companion to the book Strategic Relocations 3rd edition, and The Secure Home by Joel Skousen. When the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has already passed. Get prepared now, so if a crisis strikes your home, you and your family will be secure. Go to InfoWarsShop.com and don't forget the promo code WATER15.
And welcome back to this special edition of Infowars Nightly News. Coming up after this important segment, we're going to have David Knight back in studio interviewing a retired police officer who's exposing the fraudulent drug war and how it's used to turn our society into a third world police state. Now, Steve Shenk has been in the storable foods business for more than 30 years. He is a sponsor of Infowars Nightly News and Infowars.com and the radio show, but that's not why he's here today. He's here because, unlike anybody I know out there when it comes to food and the economy, he has seen over the horizon. If you go back to interviews we did 5 years ago, he said, you watch, in the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to see food prices explode. You're going to see dependency. You're going to see the farms bought up. And I want him today to explain how he knew that was coming. But first off, to give you the inside scoop on something that's so important, we're seeing food companies, storable food companies, period, being consolidated everywhere. And they are selling GMO crud, additives, you name it. eFoodsDirect.com/Alex to find the specials. They are one of the only companies that actually has GMO-free, ladies and gentlemen. And they do that by going to the actual growers and getting it certified with them. And we're going to talk about some of the inside baseball on that, how Monsanto and others are fighting to not even allow the testing so you can certify it at the plant. So we're going to be discussing some of that. We're going to talk about what his predictions are now unfolding here. Because, listen, I don't know how else to explain this to you. I promote what I believe in. It's elementary. And I started getting storable foods about a decade ago because I knew the Federal Reserve was private. I knew they were devaluing the currency. I knew that down the road something big could come. There could be a false flag. Now we're inside the economic implosion. Mark Faber, the big economist and billionaire fund manager, says that there's going to be a huge implosion by the end of the year. Well, yeah, because they want to then say, oh, my gosh, we need new taxes from VAT and carbon. That's now being announced by Bloomberg. So that's going to be their answer is, oh, look, we're holding you hostage. You've got to give us more money or we'll totally implode things. You've got upwards of 50 million people on food stamps. It's 48 million and change. You've got unemployment exploding, cooked numbers. Everybody knows it's a depression in most areas of the country. Even Austin, Boomtown, USA, rated the highest growth rate in the country. Most places I used to go eat are closed. Most people I know have had their pay cut or they've lost their job. It's bad here. Family I've got all over Texas. Professionals are making half the money they were making 10 years ago. This country is in trouble, and it's got a giant dependence class that believes they deserve more. And so, bottom line, The #1 thing you've got to have is food to protect your family. You will never stand in a bread line if you have your own bread, as Steve Shenk has said for a decade or longer. Now is the time, ladies and gentlemen, to have your firearms, to have your water filtration, to have your food. Even if you live in a big city. We cover that in the film Strategic Relocation and the book with Joel Skousen. Even if you have to stay where you're at, there's things you can do to mitigate it and not make yourself dependent. You know, we showed the photos on the radio today, but we'll show them again here in a moment, where FEMA had to get their food from the local churches and groups that were out there handing out, you know, the coffee and sandwiches. FEMA put up signs in New York, New Jersey saying, we're off because of bad weather. Yeah, there it is. Your government sucks when Occupy volunteers feed them. And if you scroll down, there's the photo that went viral. This was confirmed last week. We're now 14 days into this. FEMA center closed due to weather. So that's the type of information. If you want to see the full, because that graphic's cutting it off, you can scroll down and it'll actually show that photo there for everybody up at Infowars.com. But this is the joke that government can or would ever protect you. All they'll do is take your guns. We now have a criminal government, a lot bigger than just Obama, but it's all rotting. It's getting worse and worse, and so we've got to get prepared. We've got to offensively, politically expose the globalist. But at the same time, we've got to defensively protect ourselves, because that's true sovereignty, is being self-sufficient. That's why the whole nanny state is about making you dependent on them, not self-sufficient. It's called domestication. Again, Steve Shenk joins us, but I do want to point something out. I actually had 2 of the meals I was looking at earlier. I want to show the viewers this, because here I am saying get Steve in here, and then I start talking about it because I believe in it so much. If you go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex, and you just pay the shipping and handling, which is at cost, you will get not a sample meal. Steve was correcting me. It is a preparedness planning kit with the calendars, with the facts, with the booklets, and with the creamy potato soup, and with the cheesy chicken rice casserole, and other things, tortilla soup that are in here, so you can actually sample it, but actually watch and see. This CD breaks it all down. Planning, preparedness, ease of preparation, quality, affordability, introduction. It's got the booklets. You can get a plan here by the experts. And I want to explain something. When you go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex and get the free preparedness pack and the meals to test it out, Steve has been the name in this with, giant facilities for more than 3 decades. And he's the name when it comes to quality. That's why I promote him, because that's the storable food I chose. But I want to be clear about something here. He's told me this privately. Maybe he can talk about it up front here before he gets into all the inside intel he's got on where we're going in the economy, because he's right there at ground zero with food, with the elites pouring in trying to buy it up, which is in the financial pages, but you can really give us the inside baseball. But you've told me privately, I'll throw this out here now and see if you want to talk about it. You would love to be retired. You already are a well-to-do, businessman who came from a hard-working farming family. But this is a mission. You've got this passion, and you were telling me that it's the other manufacturers, the other producers, where there's more nutritional value in the box that are coming in and profiteering, that makes you so mad. You were telling me the pleasure you have having the lowest prices, the highest quality, and how angry they are that they're not able to buy you out. I mean, is it okay if I start telling that story, or have I jumped the shark here?
Well, no, it's fine, but it's not as important to your viewers as some of the material that they need to know about, so that they can take care of themselves.
But I mean, that's how passionate you are about this, because as you say, you can warn people, but you can't get them to prepare.
That's true. And the interesting thing, Alex, is that right now our people are hurting. Our whole nation is hurting. If you look at the United States, with all the blue states and red states, it's absolutely amazing. The whole country is red except for a little bit of the high population areas that are blue. And we've got states that are actually talking about having movements within them to secede from the country.
Over 50,000 signatures in a day for Texas.
It's absolutely insane. And what we had was, prior to the election, we had promotion for food stamps. I mean, they were actually selling people on the idea of going down and signing up for food stamps. It's not that people were, you know, getting to the point where they said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I need to go down and sign for food stamps. They were promoting it, openly promoting it. But now, shortly after the election, we have at least one state, Ohio, which was a swing state, very important for the voters to be involved in that state, where actually it appears that they're notifying people that their food stamp allotment for the month is going to be cut back for thousands of families. And so you got to ask yourself, what's the handwriting on the wall? Now, we had, as you've mentioned in some of your discussions, we've had the perfect storm. We've had the perfect storm out here on the East Coast, and that was coupled with the perfect storm portion, which is the greatest drought that we've had in this country's agricultural history. And you put that together with the fact that we've got the Depression that right now has surpassed anything that happened in the Great Depression. So you've got millions of our families out of work, millions of our families that want to work not being able to find work. College graduates are wondering whether they should stay in college. Some of the churches are sending some of their young people out on missions early just to get them out there and out of the way for a little while, in hopes that when they come back, there'll be something for them to do. You've got just a lot of stuff going on. And so what it kind of comes down to is, Alex, we're Americans. We were raised by forefathers that gave up tyranny, that tried to get away so that they could have religious freedom, tried to get away so that they could have personal freedom, tried to get away from the feudalism and from the despotic governments that controlled their lives. They came over here. My grandfather rode a little black stallion all the way from the East Coast out to the gold fields in California in 1849 in order to pan enough gold to go back to Germany to bring his parents and to buy a farm in Iowa, okay? Down there in some of the German settlements.
Talk about roughnecking it.
Yeah, talk about roughnecking it. And we've got people today that can't find work that are willing to work. But yet we've got a situation in our country where people are hurting for their grocery budgets to the point that half the population, to a certain extent, is one way or another needing subsidies for their groceries. And now we get some information from one of your staffers that's very interesting, that there are 75% more people out there trying to get on the food subsidy programs than there are getting jobs.
No, I saw that in the news just this morning. And I want to talk to the viewers just briefly here about a point that I haven't really made so people understand this. I was mentioning the news from yesterday when it was 36 states and 50,000 plus signatures from Texas. They put up a Daily Caller article that's up at Infowars.com that we linked to from just this morning, where it showed 600,000+ signatures now, all 50 states, and they've never seen anything like this. And it's fundamental. People get that more and more is being taken from them and being given away so that people will politically vote for socialism. This is a takeover. And it is so diabolical, and I don't even have words to describe what's going to happen as the system does this. People are going to start saying no and not complying. I mean, and the government's gearing up with 1.6 billion bullets and FEMA camps. Bottom line, I want to get into the points and the inside baseball on food. What is going to happen, Steve? You've predicted 5 years on my show or longer, every step of the way. What's coming? And, I mean, is this the Soviet-style takeover of Ukraine, where they use the shutdown of the economy and food as the way to get everybody to turn their guns in?
Well, let me ask you this. Do pigeons crap on statues? I mean...
Is the Pope Catholic? Does Tarzan go, oh?
No, as you know, I tend not to try and be political. But what I do is I look at what we're seeing out there. all these families that are hurting, so much of our population that can't afford their grocery budget, thinks that we have high food prices right now, while 20,000 of them a day are falling below the poverty line? Fact is, we haven't even seen the price increases which are the result of this drought that is the largest and the most severe that we've seen in our agriculture history. We haven't even seen those prices hit. Now, let me ask you this. If people are hungry, what's the most important thing in their mind? If people are hungry, are they going to be thinking about, well, golly, I don't want my kids sent to a school where they're taught how to think. Wait a minute. If people are hungry and they're maybe sick, what choice do they have to think about anything but taking care of their immediate needs? When Cuba, let me tell you the story about Cuba. When Castro was trying to take over Cuba, he brought in the Soviet troops to help him, okay? Now, they didn't go out into the hinterlands and go out with their rifles and try and pick the snipers out of the woods and stuff like that, because those old boys could reach out and touch someone at 400, 600 yards with no problem at all. They didn't do that. They went in and surrounded the food supplies, the warehouses and things like that. And then we played guns for food for about a month, and pretty soon all the guns were there. I can tell you about Melvin that's sitting up on top of his mountain with his 30-06, 2,000 rounds of ammunition and a bumper sticker on his Jeep Cherokee that says, "They'll get my guns when they proud of my cold, dead fingers." Okay? What all it's going to take is a few little black carryalls pulling down to the bottom of Melvin's Hill, waiting for 2 or 3 days, and one of those old boys goes around to the back of that carryall and he pulls out a loaf of bread and a peanut butter jar, and he makes up a peanut butter sandwich, and he goes to the bottom of Melvin's Hill and says, "Hey, Melvin, come on down." Well, Melvin lights off one of his 2,000 rounds of ammunition just to show him that he's serious, and he sits up there for another 2 days. But about the 5th day, guess where Melvin's Jeep Cherokee is, his guns, his 1,999 rounds of ammunition, and Melvin? You see, your food will keep your guns, but your guns won't keep your food.
And this is what the Soviets and the fascists did everywhere. And you see the plan to shut down the farmers, to shut down the backyard gardens. They're now saying chickens, we're going to fine you if their poop runs off in the water. Did you see the articles? In fact, I had them, guys. I meant to bring them over here. I had 2 articles. I may have left them in my office. The one where it's a $100,000 fine in San Diego if you wash your car yourself, saying there can't be any soap. And firefighters can't put out a building now because the chemicals in the spray might be bad for the earth. I mean, it's total. People are like, oh, yeah, that's not happening. Yes, it is. Remember, they were saying EPA rules, no farm dust from hay or you'll go to jail. I mean, they are shutting us down. I mean, this is a takeover. By the way, though, China, they can dump toxic waste right in the gutter out of the Apple factory and have suicide nets around the building and work them 18 hours a day, but it's not called slavery. But see, nobody cares about Al Gore on the board of that. This is about shutting us down. We are being taken over right now.
And so where does it go? Do you go through the political process and try and vote someone in? Or do you call up Alex and say, by golly, Alex, you just nailed it today. In fact, I've watched every one of your programs, and I take notes on what you say. We've got people out there that would not miss one of your programs, and they take notes as to what executive order was signed, and we've got a president that signed more executive orders in 1 year than all of the other presidents combined. But the fact is, they take down notes on that, but what do? You see, can you feed them?
No.
Okay, can the government feed them? They just proved every disaster that we have, FEMA proves that they don't have any food. They're just proving it again.
They can't even find their butt with both hands.
Okay, well, I'm not aware of FEMA's butt. I'm really not attracted to that, and so I never have analyzed that, so I can't give you an opinion on that, but I can tell you that what happens is at a certain point, a true American has to say, if it is to be, it's up to me. And you see, they can take notes on your warnings. You can warn them, but you can't feed them. I can come on your program and I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. I told you, we discussed, what, 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, when the statements were made that there will be no coal-fired electrical plants allowed to exist because they will be taxed out, it will make it impossible for them to have those. Okay? Now, after almost 4 years, we're seeing that come to fruition.
Well, actually, they shut down over 200, and power prices in Austin have doubled. And now they announced in the paper a month ago, they said we're going to shut down our final city-owned plant for the earth. But really, it's so other big companies can double charge. I mean, this is a criminal takeover.
I don't have to know why it is, Alex. I don't have to know what their plan is.
They're just doing it.
All I have to know is that if these lovely American families out there, who all they want to do is have a happy life and live the American dream, can't afford their stinking food right now, not their stinking food, but their food right now, and we've got this drought that's going to cause those food prices to go higher, and then promises have been made by the government to feed people, where do they get the food? Well, guess what? When all of these folks that were just encouraged to vote in a certain way in this election come and say, we need food, where's it going to come from? It's going to come from the supply houses that are supplying the grocery stores now to the people who are working hard to afford their food, and those people who have been prudent enough to save a little bit of gold for their retirement. Those disabled veterans who go down to the line to buy food with their retirement check or their disability check. And those people who have just enough money to pay for groceries this month. When they go and the food has been taken away to feed the others. Talk about taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Taking from the haves and feeding the have-nots. When it gets down to just food, it's one thing to have it taxed away from you, but when it's another thing to say food is basically the battleground of this generation. So those folks that listen to you, that are dyed-in-the-wool, red-blooded Americans that say, no more, I'm not going to stand for it, they better dadgum well stop taking notes on what you say and stop the warnings. They don't need any more warnings. They can shut you off right today, not hear one more stinking thing. They focused all of their energy on taking care of themselves and putting in a supply of food, because if you've got food, you never have to stand in a bread line to give up your guns. You never have to stand in a bread line to give up your kids. You never have to stand in a bread line to give up your rights and your freedoms and your property and your health care and everything else.
And by the way, that's the new thing. It sounds reasonable, but it's the eugenics model. They dumb everybody down, ship drugs in their neighborhoods, ship their jobs overseas, and then say, now you want welfare, you're going to be drug tested. Then they give you false positives and take your kids. That's now beginning. But now they're talking about drug testing you to have a job anywhere. The Pentagon wants to run this domestically. And so just like the school lunch programs, once they've got you and they're feeding you, the state of California argued 2 years ago in a federal case that they own your kids. They're now giving kids inoculations in California without parental consent. They are now giving them shots without their parents' consent. I mean, you're right. I get on the air now, and I'm like, what am I even doing here? It's all so over the top, and people are either waking up, have woken up, or they're in, like, catatonic states. What's going to happen, Steve, from your historical research, to the people, because that's a danger level, to the hordes? Over 60% the numbers were, and our listeners confirmed this in Newark, New Jersey, who had a week to get ready for Sandy, made no preparation. It was the churches, the Christians, and others that ended up feeding the neighbors, and 14, 15 days into this, that's still happening. They're now feeding FEMA. This is in the local news, but not in the national news. What is going to happen as the slow depression unravels, as the food prices go up, as the dollar's devalued, as government hoards food, digs in, what will it look like for the people? Because I've seen the Pentagon statistics. They've studied this in a lot of nations. I know you've studied it. I've heard your radio show years ago breaking it down. What is it? 5 to 7 days, most people will steal to get food. 10 days, 90+% will kill to get food. Within 15 days, 90+%, 92, 93, will cannibalize and eat people. They will put your child on a spit and barbecue them and gobble them with a napkin. And so my point is, no, but I'm serious.
I know you are,
I'm not saying it's going all the way there.
That's more graphic than I can even get, and I'm German.
Well, the point is that, Steve, I mean, government's digging in like it's the end of the world. Of course, I guess they know they're going to shut everything down unless we politically expose them. They back off, but we may not beat them. We've got to get efoodsdirect.com/Alex, a starter pack.
You tell me what the hope is. Is it to turn on Alex Jones every day and listen and get more aggravated? No. Is it to hope in one hand and spit in the other and see which gets full first, that somebody is going to get elected to Congress that's going to fix it?
I think it's Mike Adams' solution. It's a can with Obama on it that you beg with. And then when you need food, you go out and then...
No. Let's pull it back a little bit from that. I'm not ready for that yet.
No, but seriously, we got to have the radio show to reach people that don't know what's going on.
That's right.
But I agree. Look, you see it, and this is why I wanted you in here. Break down the numbers for people, because we can pull up the articles all day long and show them to people, but all over CNBC, you name it, record numbers of people flooding in, Steve. Break this down. Big companies, globalists buying up farmland, food production, storable food companies, gun companies. I mean, that is the big boom. That's what Jim Rogers, Mark Faber, all the big experts, all the really, guys that have proven they know what they're talking about.
6 months ago, one of the most, I guess, revered, I'm not sure about respected, but one of those revered counselors with regard to investments and things like that said, get out of gold, get into agriculture. Get out of gold, get into agriculture. Think about it. As soon as this election finished up, the stock market went down the slippery slope, and people were investing in guns and agriculture. There's a consolidation of food storage companies under big money. But let's go back to what the answer is. What's the hope? Do we hope that you, by screaming and telling people what the problems are, is going to fix it? I'm sorry. I love you to pieces, but it ain't going to fix nobody, because you can warn them, but you can't feed them. Is it the hope that somebody is going to be able to be elected to political office and be able to withstand the good old boy system that says, now you're special. Now you get a special license plate. Now you get to go where other people can't go. Very few human beings are capable of resisting that temptation. That's not the answer. The answer is not maybe some leader that comes and says, let's go forth and conquer, take back our country. If you look at the red and blue states after this election, it's all red with a little bit of blue. That encourages me, because it means that there's some people out there that are listening, and they'll listen to this one thing that they can do. The one thing. Not elect somebody, not go through the process, not rebel, not get their guns and go out and shoot somebody. The one thing they can do is go back and get with their sweetheart and their family. They can sit down and say, whatever our situation is, we're going to get into a circumstance where it's going to be harder and harder for us to get food availability or to afford food. So let's do everything we can to freeze the cost of the food by getting it in our possession. Why did people buy gold as quick as they could when they saw it was going to go up? They wanted to freeze the price of the gold where they could afford it and get it in their possession, so when it went up, they'd have the value. Why not do it with the most important thing? What about food? Freeze the cost of that food at today's prices. It's already high, but it's going to go higher because we haven't even seen the prices.
And eFoods has a 25-year shelf life.
Yeah.
I want to answer some common questions people have.
Let me finish first.
Yes.
In addition to freezing the price of the food, the most important thing that people need to do is get it into their possession and thereby freeze the availability. Because there will come a time when a guy can stand there with a $10,000 valued sack of gold and another guy stands in front of his house that has $10,000 at today's prices worth of food stored aside. And the guy with the gold will not eat because any idiot that has food when that time comes would not be foolish enough. The gold, Ecclesiastes, interesting thing. Bible. And they shall cast their coins into the streets, and the gold will be for naught, and their bowels will not be filled. What are the coins? Back then it was silver. Their gold will be for naught because it won't buy anything, and their bowels will not be filled. Okay, that's our times.
Well, to be specific with my strategy, there's obviously people that are working class in this corrupt system who can barely even get prepared. Obviously, the first thing you get is food and water filtration and a firearm to protect yourself. If you're more middle class and have more money, you diversify out, get a lot of food, enough to take care of your neighbors and your family. Even if your neighbors and family are laughing at you now, it's good to stockpile. That's what I've done. And then, of course, if you're really wealthy, I mean, obviously, people need to get into gold and silver as a backup. You can't trust these banks anymore. But you know, I hope it doesn't get to the point where you're proven completely right. But already, if people would have bought food 3 years ago that lasts 25 years, how much has food on average gone up in 3 years? Isn't it like 60% or something?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah, yeah.
And some things 200%.
Yeah, some
it's apples and oranges. I mean,
yeah.
We've seen what in the last year, and then about 30–40% of that increase, right?
Easily, easily. In fact, if you look at the gas prices, the food prices and the gas prices are floating right next to each other. It's almost a layover graph. But the answer is very simple. What everybody has to do is get up and look in the mirror every morning and say, if it is to be, it's up to me. And whether they're standing with a cardboard sign saying, please, any loose change will do, or whether they're a disabled vet that's just barely making it, or whether they're a yuppie that's too much in debt, they have to sit back and say, okay, what am I going to do? What's my plan? Because if you look to somebody else, if you look to the system that says, oh, come down and we'll feed you, but they have no food to feed.
Well, the whole country is one paycheck away from rack and ruin.
Absolutely.
Because even if there are people that are well-to-do, the whole system's teetering. The infrastructure is just on-time deliveries. Everything, the public is so soft. Not all the public, but, you know, you were telling me stories last time we were here about your father, you know, who was, you know, slaughtering how many pigs in one day by himself?
he got through the Depression by butchering hogs by himself because his hired man left.
But I mean, how many pigs in one day? It was a lot.
Well, no, it wasn't in one day. He probably did about one a day, but he had 32 hogs that he eventually turned into whole hog sausage and managed to get
Point is, I've butchered stuff and it will kick your butt.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is not fun. It's not fun having a pig drawn up on chains and having to slit his throat. I mean, it's not fun killing things.
You're awfully graphic today. My gosh, you're just, you know, you're just cutting and peeling and slicing, aren't you? Let's get back to what people can do. What every one of us has to do, folks, is we have to get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, if it's to be, it's up to me. But I live in America. I'll be with you in a minute. And I'm surrounded with Americans. And what you see on the news, you know, it's kind of interesting. When poor old, what's that golfer? Come on, the guy that got himself in trouble.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah, Tiger Woods. When he had his little ditty with all his girls and stuff like that, the media could come up with who he ran with, when he did it, how he did it. We got all of his personal life out there all over the place. But we've got a man that's been supposedly running our country for 4 years, and we still don't know where he was educated and where he's from and whether he really should be president. And I don't want to get into that. But you see, we have Americans that are sitting back there and saying, yeah, but really, I want to take care of myself, and I want to be independent, and I want to get back to the American dream. The only way we can do that is we can't depend on somebody else.
No, I agree. efoodsdirect.com/Alex if people want to get the preparedness plan and the sample meals and the audio CD information. Absolutely key, or the number 800. We'll put that number up on screen, 800-409-5633. I believe in efoodsdirect.com. And I tell you, Steve Shenk, it's not some faceless big mega corporation. He is the real deal and quite a character, and also popular with our viewers, and you also fund and support helping us get the First Amendment out to so many people. Now, we're about to go to break and come back with David Knight and his next guest who's fighting tyranny. But in closing, as you told it on the radio today, but I was interrupting as usual, you get me excited, Steve, with all your points. Briefly, tell the Lion King parallel, because I've got kids, they've seen it. I've seen the great play here in Austin down at the Music Center. Yep. So almost everybody's seen the Lion King, or they've read the book. And it's absolutely true, and it's what the Soviets did, it's what the communists, the fascists did. I mean, the Romans would come in and take control of the fields and stuff, and wait for the locals to come give themselves up. I mean, this is how you take over. Genghis Khan knew this. So spend 2 or 3 minutes on that, breaking down the story of the Lion King and how it parallels all of this.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Everyone has seen The Lion King, I assume, but it'd be good if they went back and watched the movie again. And when Scar, the bad brother, comes in, and he gets with the hyenas. Now, what are hyenas? Hyenas are the scavengers. They're the ones that come in after the lionesses, who are the hunters, for Pride Land. They go out and do the work, and they
bring down the game. The hyenas come and steal it.
There you go. The hyenas are the scavengers, okay? But old Scar gets with them, and he says, you stick with me, and you'll never go hungry again. And they are doing all their snickering and stuff like that. It was very, very well done. But what happens after that occurs? What happens is that you see Scar demanding that the lionesses keep on going out and working and doing what they did. But they have all these hyenas and all of the ones that Scar has promised to take care of feeding off from it. And pretty soon the Pride Lands are in desolation. They have the drought, and they have all of the starvation, and everything is in tyranny.
Well, the blessing is lifted.
The blessing is lifted. And so if you look at that as a parallel as to exactly what's happening in this country, the blessed country, what do we say? In God we trust. They're trying to take it off of our money, but we do.
And every time Israel, or every time people go away from God and God's law, you go into bondage. Every culture, every group, whether you come from...
But what's God's law? It's not about being a Christian. This is going to be something that a lot of people will stop and say, what the heck is Steve Shenk saying? What is God's law? We got 2 laws. One says, work hard. Trust in God, pray, have faith, and if it is to be, it's up to you. And let the glory be thine, because you build your kingdom trusting in God, being grateful for what you have. The other one is the dark side that says, I'll take care of you. Just do what I say, and you'll never be hungry again. But let the glory be mine. Now, every Christian that's watching us talk recognizes that as the war in heaven, where the good and the evil propose their plans. And their plan God's law is justice and freedom and the dignity of the human being and the ability to build and be captain of your soul and master of your destiny through prayer, and if you don't believe in God, through meditation, through depending on becoming what you can be and all you can be. The dark plan says, I'll take care of you. Be lazy. Don't develop yourself. Why do you need to develop to who you could be when you have everything given to you? What does an enabler-enablee situation do? An enablee becomes a terrorist and he says, I'm going to jump off the cliff unless you catch me. The enabler says, no, 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 but I love you. What do terrorists do? They try and hold your wife in hopes you'll pay a ransom. The Israelis come in and say, hell no. You have no hold on me. Well, how about some Americans saying, hell no. Nobody has a hold on me because I'm going to go out and do what I do best and become all that I can be. Like the Army says, become all you can be.
Exactly, but the corrupt system doesn't want people to be strong and independent.
Of course
they want to cut your legs off.
Because when they are no longer starving so they can think of nothing else but food, then they start to have feelings. And as soon as they start to have feelings, they start to say, this isn't right. And they start to think, because as soon as they get enough food in them so they can start to have feelings and think, then they will throw off any oppressive government and say, I want to be who I can be.
I want to be free.
As long as they're hungry and starving and have to spend every working hour just to get a morsel of food in.
And begging and standing in government lines like the Soviet Union. Steve Shenk, each interview gets more powerful. Thank you for coming here to town. And I think, folks, you know where to get your high-quality, storable foods. He supports the Infowars. We support Steve Shenk. God bless you, my friend.
Appreciate you, bud.
You bet. Well, that's it for this portion of Infowars Nightly News. We're going to go to break, come back with David Knight and his guest, also fighting tyranny on yet another level. Stay with us. And again, great sponsor, efoodsdirect.com/Alex to get the planter pack and the free meals. All you pay is the shipping. And we'll also, again, put that number up on screen one more time in case people want to be able to go over there to efoodsdirect.com/Alex and call the number. You can call the number 800-409-5633 and check it out there. It's good to be self-sufficient, and it feels good as a backup plan. Unfortunately, more and more it's looking like we may have to use this parachute. I'm glad I got mine. Do you have yours? We'll be right back with David Knight. It's Infowars Nightly News.
As we saw in Katrina, and as we are watching now in New York and New Jersey, the federal government can't and won't help you in a crisis. FEMA ran out of water and MREs in days. Electricity is still off to over 1 million people. The Red Cross, who is quick to beg for money, is now slow to react. Don't put it off any longer. Get prepared today. The Infowars shop is the largest distributor of ProPure water filter systems. And now, get 15% off your ProPure order with the promo code WATER15. While you're on InfoWarsShop.com, check out these other great preparedness items. The Aquapod kit lets you store up to 65 gallons of water in your bathtub. Pocket Socket provides you with manual electricity for small electronics like your cell phone. The Life Straw is great for your bug-out bag. And check out our complete line of Interfood products for great tasting and nutritionally dense foods that have a great shelf life. If you are looking to secure your home in a crisis, you can order Strategic Relocations, the film, a great companion to the book Strategic Relocations 3rd edition, and The Secure Home by Joel Skousen. When the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has already passed. Get prepared now, so if a crisis strikes your home, you and your family will be secure. Go to InfoWarsShop.com and don't forget the promo code WATER15.
Well, I'm joined now by Brian Vincente. He's a director with Sensible Colorado, and he had played a major role in the passage of Amendment 64 in Colorado this last election just a week ago, which legalized marijuana. Now, Brian is a partner in a law firm that helps people navigate through medical marijuana laws in Colorado and now in Massachusetts, since that's been passed there. Brian, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you explain for us the difference between decriminalization and legalization?
Sure. Both those are a little amorphous terms, but generally decriminalization means removing criminal sanctions from marijuana, but still having civil sanctions. So, for instance, there's some states, I believe New York, Massachusetts, that have, you still, get in trouble by the police. If you have marijuana, they'll still confiscate it. They'll just issue more of a citation, kind of like a parking ticket as opposed to a criminal ticket. What we did in Colorado, though, was just remove penalties altogether for adults 21 and over for limited possession and limited cultivation. So it really is legalization as opposed to just decriminalizing.
Now, it's going to be taxed. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. The voters passed a fairly hefty tax. I mean, the way this works is starting in 2014, we will have new stores opening up that will sell marijuana, like alcohol, individual stores selling to those 21 and over. All those sales will be subject to a state and local tax, but they also will be subject to a up to 15% excise tax. That's expected to generate about $60 million in new tax revenue, and that first $40 million specifically from the excise tax is credited towards public school construction every year.
Okay, all right. So I guess we could kind of say the difference in decriminalization and legalization is when they take your money, they call it a fine in one case and a tax in the other, right? But at least they're not locking people up, and that's a good thing because I think one of the other interviews that we have on today is with LEAP, Law Enforcement Officers Against Prohibition, and they pointed out that half of the people that are in prison are there because of possession of marijuana. Half the people in prison because of drug offenses, I should say. So, that's a major thing. Whether people are involved or really care about marijuana personally, they're still affected by that because it's a huge expense, as well as we'll be talking about the corruption that comes with it and that sort of thing, because these guys have seen it in depth. But I wanted to ask you, Governor Hickenlooper, as well as the Attorney General Suthers, have both resisted it when it was, being put forth as a ballot initiative. They both said that they're going to go along with the voters, but then they kind of kicked back and said, well, the federal government has the last word on this. What do you think is really going to happen at this point?
We've had meetings with a number of government officials, and we feel fairly confident that they will follow the law as passed by voters of Colorado. It's hard to say exactly what direction this will head in, but we do know that we have a firm mandate from the people of Colorado who have said, this is what they want. They don't want the marijuana trade run by cartels. They want it run by a state-regulated and taxed business. So it's our hope that Suthers and our Governor Hickenlooper will remember who they work for. And they don't work for the federal government. They work for the voters of this state.
That's true. You mentioned the cartels. In the wake of this passage, I saw several articles saying that the government of Mexico was now saying that this was going to have major impact on the drug cartels in Mexico. I mean, that's what everybody that's been against prohibition all along has been saying that all along from the very beginning. Just as with alcohol prohibition, you had people machine gunning each other in the streets. This is, there's a huge war going on in Mexico that's centered around the drug trade, and there's been far more people killed there than in the Afghanistan war. It's amazing. So, yeah, hopefully that's going to do something. What do you expect to see with that?
Well, we really hope this will be the shot that's heard around the world. And what we've found is, since voters passed this just last week, we've already had the president of Mexico, Belize, Costa Rica, and Honduras issue a joint statement from those officials saying that, based off these votes in Colorado and Washington, we need to rethink our country's drug policy. We think that's a phenomenal step forward. About 60,000 people have been butchered along the Mexican border because of the war on drugs. And it's because we have an underground market. And we saw this with alcohol prohibition, where Al Capone and thugs like that ran the market for that substance. And now what we're doing is taking that substance away from those gangsters, moving it into a regulated system. And I think it really is, it's the way things are headed down the road, and we're excited to be launching that in Colorado.
Yeah, when you look at it, it's really amazing. I mean, when you compare the violence with our current drug war versus the alcohol prohibition, it's way, way bigger. I mean, it's been going on for a much longer period of time, unfortunately, and it's just escalated over the decades to something that's just huge. Well, one of the questions that comes to mind is, as this is legalized, what happens to the people who are in prison for just possession of marijuana? Do they? That's kind of a strange situation. What would happen with that?
Well, it is. I mean, unfortunately, our law does not, instantly allow for amnesty for those individuals. I was one of the drafters, and it's very difficult to draft a law that acts retroactively like that. Often that power is reserved to the executive branch. That's why you see governors pardoning people and so forth. But the good thing is what we've seen today, and this is kind of breaking news, is that we're seeing district attorneys around our state issuing statements saying that they are not going to prosecute people for this law, for marijuana possession from here on out. Now, our law hasn't even gone into effect yet. It'll go into effect in about 30 days. But they're saying we're stopping these immediately. Anyone that's in the system currently, if you have a trial slated for tomorrow or next week, you were busted 6 months ago, they're going to drop those cases. And so it's really a positive step forward.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I hadn't realized that. Because I guess it takes quite a while for the trials to run through the system, and by the time they get through the system, it's going to become legal. So that's interesting. Now, in California, we've talked to some people in California, most recently a fellow named Jason Andrews, who had gone through all the different loops, jump through all the hoops to become a legitimate medical marijuana dispensary, and he provided a lot of stuff for people for free. He's a Christian. He felt like that was his responsibility to do that. He was playing by all the rules, got every kind of permit he could get, but in L.A., they came down on him very hard and confiscated all of his stuff. And he was telling us that there's a lot of jurisdictional difference in California, where in L.A., for example, they're going to come after you hard. If you go to Oakland, they're just going to leave you alone. Is that something you expect to see in Colorado? Is there a lot of locality discretion in that?
Well, in terms of our state laws are forever changed. We added a provision in our Constitution that allows adults to possess and cultivate small amounts of marijuana. So district attorneys have no discretion anymore. They cannot bring those cases. But to your question, more specifically, is how's the federal government going to react? Well, we have the exact same, federal, head of the DEA for the entire state. Previously, this gentleman has said that, medical marijuana is not a big concern for him unless you're really, acting in a way that endangers youth or teens. So it's our hope that in fact, they will use their discretion to allow this vote to take place and allow for us to establish this regulatory model.
That's good. Yeah, it's really going to kind of set up maybe a 10th Amendment type of issue. Is that you've had the people in the state speak on an issue. Now we're going to have to see if the feds will do it. And I guess it's... And that brings up a question I've had for prohibition for a long time. That is, we had alcohol prohibition. It required the 18th Amendment because everybody at the time recognized that the federal government didn't have any right to prohibit the possession and use of anything. But we've never had the equivalent of an 18th Amendment for marijuana or for any other substance that's been done since then. As a lawyer, what do you think about that? I mean, why is that?
Well, I just think the federal government has done a heck of a job convincing the public that marijuana is this evil substance. War on drugs has been very effective at pushing misinformation and convincing, you know, in schools, public schools, teach people that marijuana will make your head explode. I mean, these kind of crazy reefer madness stories that really began in the early 1900s and go up till today. Fortunately, in places like Colorado, we've been able to push back, you know, educate the public through, you know, consistent, you know, campaigns that we've run here for about 8 years to get the public to understand that, in fact, you know, marijuana is not as bad as they've heard. In fact, it has, you know, legitimate medical, you know, purposes and can be efficacious in that area. And really, it's safer than alcohol. And if you get people to understand that, then they will think twice about changing these laws. So we think that's positive. You know, in terms of the federal government, I mean, they can act today to reschedule marijuana. It's currently a Schedule I substance, which means, you know, under federal law, it's the most, you know, dangerous substance known to man, next to plutonium, essentially. And they, via executive action, could remove that from Schedule I today, or Congress could take that up as well. And I think the wins in Colorado and Washington are really sending a message to our Congress people and our federal representatives that we need to rethink these strategies, and I hope they will work for us in D.C.
Yeah, I know recently some people have put together a petition to try to get the FDA to reschedule marijuana from Schedule I. They have just ignored it up to this point. So we'll have to see what happens. But I guess, you know, like you said, there's been a lot of disinformation and propaganda about drugs, about marijuana in particular. But there's also, I think, a lot of ignorance about how the government works. You know, we've allowed the government, the federal government, to assume powers that it doesn't have when it prohibits this stuff. I mean, they've essentially taken the tack that, you know, whether you're talking about a medical drug or whether you're talking about a recreational drug, everything is prohibited unless they expressly permit it. You know, that's kind of exactly the opposite of where it was at the beginning of the 20th century. One last question. We had a recent report with a guy, I don't know if you've ever heard of the New Jersey Weed Man, and he won his case. He actually had a pound of marijuana, which I think your law allows people to have an ounce at a time on them or something?
That's correct. Adults 21 and over can have up to an ounce.
Right. Well, he was a medical marijuana patient in Colorado. He went back home to New Jersey, had a pound with him, and he got busted. Now, he broke that he didn't contest the fact that he had the marijuana. What he did was he represented himself because he couldn't get a lawyer to do it, and he went fully for jury nullification. Because in New Jersey, it's part of the state constitution. But again, you've got judges and prosecutors who, you know, will not let the public know what their legal rights are and don't let the juries know about that. So is there anything in Colorado about jury nullification in the Constitution that you know? I mean, is there something in the Constitution that says, like it does in New Jersey, that jurors have the right to judge the law as well as the facts of a case? Are you aware of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, jury nullification is alive and well in Colorado. I'm not sure if it's specifically in our state constitution, but, you know, the way our jury system and our legal system is set up is, you know, jurors have the right to decide what they view as justice. And ultimately, we do see cases like the Weed Man, where jurors say, you know, we've heard enough, you know, we're not ready to convict this guy, and they don't even need to give a reason, you know. And so jury nullification, I think, is something that folks should know more about, especially while we continue to have just laws that are insane around drugs in our country. I mean, Colorado now has basically the best marijuana laws in the world, but if you drive over to Utah or Kansas, it's a different story. And I hope people in those communities realize that you know, hopefully they'll be able to change their state laws soon. But in the meantime, there's power in that jury box.
Yeah, that was part of his calculus. Was he figured that about 50% of the people don't agree with the marijuana laws. So he thought that he could at least get some hung juries. He got one hung jury, and then he got a unanimous acquittal the second trial. So, you know, and he was about right, I guess, because you got 55% of the vote. So he did a little bit better than that. Well, thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate it. Good luck, and I really appreciate what you've done for freedom and for, you know, doing what you can to end prohibition. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we just spoke to Brian Vicente with Sensible Colorado about the Colorado legalization of marijuana. That also happened in Washington, and we just learned today that in Rhode Island and in Maine, legislation will be introduced tomorrow by legislators there to legalize marijuana. So it looks like we've got something of a brush fire going on with legalization. I think people are starting to wake up to prohibition. And somebody that's woken up to prohibition that had a long experience with it, we've got as our next guest. His name is James Gierach. He is vice president, executive vice president, and board member of LEAP. That's Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Their website is leap.cc. Now, he's had 43 years of legal practice, including governmental bodies. He's a former Cook County drug homicide prosecutor, and he was named by an Illinois paper as Illinois' preeminent conscientious objector in the war on drugs. Hi, James. How you doing? Sorry, Jim. You want to go by Jim. That's correct.
Good to be with you.
So tell us a little bit about how you went from a prosecutor to a conscientious objector.
In the early 70s, I prosecuted drug and homicide cases, and in the early 70s in Cook County, i.e. Chicago, the best heroin you'd get was 2% pure. Jump forward 40 years, in Cook County, you can now get 90% pure heroin. The other thing that bothered me was that we had so many murders. After I left the office in 1994, after 4 years prosecuting, we had this epidemic of crime and murder. And so often it was the gangs shooting each other, fighting over who was going to control the drug business. So in one weekend in Chicago, in about 1991, we had 12 kids killed in one weekend. And some of them innocent crossfire victims, some of them participants in the drug war. But the politicians who I would listen to at the time say we need to get tough, crack down on crime, take back our streets, three-time loser laws, build some prisons. And the result was that things just got worse, and there was no choice to the public, whether Republican or Democrat. Both teams were selling the same drug war snake oil. So as the years went by, I saw that not only does the war on drugs not work, it's the most effective way to put more drugs uncontrolled and unregulated everywhere. But it's also the heart of nearly any crisis you can name in America. The problem of guns and gangs and crime, prisons, taxes, deficits, AIDS, healthcare, trade imbalance, corruption, no money for schools, job programs, the funding of terrorism. You name the crisis in America, and the war on drugs, public enemy number one, makes those problems worse. And each of them comes with a price tag, so that really, when you put them all together at the national, state, and local level, we can't pay the bills. And that is really the biggest threat to the continuation of the war on drugs. It causes so many problems for so many people in so many different ways that government can't pay the bills. And that's one of the reasons the people are fed up, and so they're expressing their view in referendums like we saw in Colorado and Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've even seen jury nullification, like in New Jersey, cases like that. I mean, you know, we just talked to a fellow New Jersey weed man. He had a pound of marijuana, and he didn't even contest his innocence according to the drug laws. He said he knew that more than half of the people were against it, so he defended himself and just went for a straight jury nullification. He got a hung jury once, and then he got a complete acquittal the second trial. So,
see, I think what's really apparent from these referendums in Colorado and Washington is that there's such a gulf, a chasm between what the public mind sees as what it should be versus what the United States Congress and our federal laws say that it should be. And that is really even more important than what happens in one of 50 states. It's a stone being thrown at the war on drugs because it doesn't work, and the people recognize it, and they're expressing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I watched Ken Burns' documentary on alcohol prohibition with my 20-year-old sons, and their first comment was, it's exactly like the war on drugs. You know, they were talking about how, what you mentioned before, it went from 2% to 90% purity. You know, the same thing happened in alcohol. They started going to really hard liquors, and as well as the violence, the corruption, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the Tommy guns went to AK-47s instead of hanging off the running boards on Packards. Now it's SUVs.
That's right. That's right. Well, our war on drugs has been going on a lot longer. You know, it was Nixon that coined the term, and then you know, Reagan came along with zero tolerance and mandatory minimums. How did that affect things, you think? And as you saw, the mandatory minimums and the zero tolerance and that sort of thing kind of targeted the end user.
Well, all of these programs were designed to show zero tolerance, where in America we used to teach tolerance was a virtue. Well, but the war on drugs, intolerance became a virtue. And so now the land of the free became the prison capital of the world, as we decided we were going to make a crime out of adults voluntarily entering into a drug transaction with a willing seller and a willing buyer. We outlaw the drugs so that this plant, often cocaine, heroin, marijuana, things that are growing on a plant, become the most valuable commodity on the face of the earth. Right. We tell the kids, don't do drugs, and then we slide a pot of gold next to the choice we tell them not to take. And we're surprised why so many kids are dropping out of school, joining a gang, shooting each other. We give addicts no alternative to get the drug to which they're addicted lawfully. So every addict becomes a crime wave. And then, as I say, we build these prisons to the point where we can't pay for schools. In California, they have 171,000 people behind bars. In Illinois, where I'm from, we have 50,000. Texas and Florida are over 100,000. Can't pay the bills. The Global Commission on Narcotics Drugs a year ago issued its report, and it said that worldwide, the effect of the drug war is that opiate use is up 34.5%. Cocaine use worldwide is up 27%. This is over a 10-year period worldwide, and ending in 2008. And cannabis use is up 8.5% worldwide. Worldwide, just to convert those percentages into numbers, cannabis use, they estimated 160 million people around the world. Well, the United States is going broke, locking up 2.3 million.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
If you open up an almanac or an atlas, or an almanac rather, and you can see that a huge percent of the people in the United States have used an illicit drug at one time or another. If we lock them up, we can't pay the bills for other things.
That's right. I remember when mandatory minimum first came in, they couldn't build the prisons quickly enough. So they were letting out violent offenders to put away people who had possession charges of something like marijuana. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And you were a prosecutor. I mean, the judges had no discretion under the mandatory minimums because they were mandatory. They were mandated by the federal government.
In the 1990s, the fastest growing housing in the United States was prisons. And you can't do anything less productive with a taxpayer's dollar than hire somebody to watch somebody else do nothing.
That's right.
Which is what prisons are, and it's also a lot to do with what the national transportation folks are doing nowadays. But
that's right, and of course we all pay for that in our taxes. You know, many people who don't use drugs look at this and they think that they're doing something to help their fellow man, but what they're doing is they're raising their taxes, and the government operates by force. And it's kind of like the old adage, you know, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like, if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so the government, you know, tries to use force against every problem. And I think, you know, people are starting to realize finally that the drug issue it's a medical problem as well as maybe a spiritual problem. I mean, there's other aspects, other ways that it can be handled, that the law enforcement aspect of it is not that great. I mean, you know, I'd like for the listeners to look up overdose in prison and look at how many stories there are about people who died of overdoses in prison. There was a mother who called the police on her son, wanted to get him off of drugs, thought putting him in jail would get him off of drugs, and instead he died of an overdose in prison. So you have to ask, what kind of a society are we going to have if we're going to do it by interdiction and force, if they can't in prisons stop it with interdiction and force?
You know, we used to teach in our society that we care about one another, and we tried to teach the golden rule. Now we have put in place this law enforcement drug war, where we catch somebody who's violating this consensual drug law, and then we tell them, you're either going to tell us who sold you these drugs or you're going to prison forever. Sacrifice somebody else to save yourself. We seize drugs by the ton, and we prosecute them by the gram. In drug policy, one of the things I've learned over the years is everything works in reverse. You sit down and you think of, well, what would be a good, sensible idea? Because drug use is not something to encourage, it should be discouraged. So I think, well, let's outlaw the drugs. Well, okay, when you outlaw them, now you take something that grows on this plant and make it so valuable that you tempt people to do the wrong thing. We think, well, drugs are bad, so let's put these anti-drug advertisements on, but the Partnership for Drug-Free America and the Ad Council making the ads, and these are your brains on drugs, and they show the scrambled eggs and the domestic fight over the sink. In fact, an anti-drug ad is a drug ad. whether you say to use the drug or don't use the drug. So again, everything works in reverse. You think, well, we just seized a ton of drugs. It would be a good idea to destroy this ton of drugs, to keep it off the streets and away from the people. But the drug cartels would want us to do that. If we are in possession of the drugs and could use it in an addict alternative program or in some kind of a lawful dispensation and control the distribution of drugs, now the cartels were no longer exclusively in control. Yeah. So the drug cartels are in favor of what we do when we destroy these drugs.
Exactly.
And why should we be working for the Al Capones and the drug cartels of Mexico and elsewhere?
Exactly. Just as we saw the end of alcohol prohibition put the Al Capones out of business, immediately after the Colorado initiative passed, Mexico and other Central and South American countries were saying that it was going to have a tremendous effect on the drug cartels down there. You know, and they have an absolute, it's not just a war on drugs, a metaphorical war. I mean, they've got a war that they have higher casualties than Afghanistan.
60,000 people killed during Philip Calderon's tour as president, using United States money, duplicating Plan Colombia and now Plan Mexico. It's just horrible. I was down there as a guest speaker in February of this year, and they had invited 38 speakers from around the world. And I have a United Nations gentleman on the stage with me who said, well, we can't legalize drugs because it would be bad for the public health. I happen to be the speaker right after him. So I get up and I walked over to my friend Antonio Mazzatelli, who represented Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean, and said, well, how is it helpful to put in place a United Nations drug policy that prohibits drugs, the Al Capone drug policy paradigm that has produced 60,000 murders in Mexico? How is that good for the public health? Why we speakers have been in town. The Mexican authorities seized 15 tons of meth in one seizure. How is that good for the public health when you have a drug policy that attracts that much drugs in one place? The seizure of a huge amount of drugs is not an evidence of drug war success, but evidence of the failure of the war on drugs and the magnitude of that failure. The bigger the seizure, the bigger the failure.
That's right, because you're just seeing the tip of an iceberg being caught there.
Sure. Well, I mean, something's wrong when you're trying to prohibit drugs and you seize it by the ton. In Chicago, we had 8 tons seized here in the last year of marijuana coming in by boxcar loads, and they branded it as a big bust for marijuana here in Chicago. And it sounds like a lot, and unless you know that the United States Department of Justice said that in the year 2008, Mexico produced 21,500 tons of marijuana. And you can see that 8 tons is a drop in the bucket, absolutely insignificant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, we talked about the crime increases, the corruption increases, but one of the things that people don't think about is how the corruption to due process, you know, the violence that it's done to people, even people who are not necessarily involved in the drug trade. We've seen a lot of people over the decades get hit with, we've seen Learjets charged with being an accessory to a drug and being seized, you know, because, of course, Learjets have no due process, and neither apparently does the owner of the Learjet, because, you know, they don't charge him, but they charge the Learjet. So we've seen that kind of fantasy happening. We've seen that kind of loss of due process, and that's something that affects everybody in the country, doesn't it? As a prosecutor, I mean.
Those types of cases are known as in rem proceedings, where you're suing the object that's the naughty object. And the reason they do that is because the government wants to forfeit the drug dealer's money. They want to forfeit the property, the planes, the boats, all of this stuff. And then it becomes ours. The local law enforcement agency gets to split the money, half for the local agency and half for the federal government. So it's in the police officer's interest and law enforcement's interest and the municipality's interest to forget about the murder and the armed robbery and the rapists, because we don't get a commission for that, but we get half the money if we go do a stakeout and work the drug crime. So the incentive is to work on consensual drug crime instead of violent crime.
Exactly.
So that there's now this rift between the citizenry and law enforcement that wouldn't be there but for the the war on drugs, just as the racism in our prison system, where blacks and browns and poor people are locked up disproportionately to their drug use.
That's tremendous. Yeah, that's tremendous. Yeah, in terms of talking about ignoring regular crime, that was another thing that happened during alcohol prohibition. People saw for the first time they would go around harassing people for, the police would be harassing someone for alcohol, and right down the street a bank is getting robbed. I mean, that was kind of unprecedented. That was the first time we saw that, but it's always going to be that way with prohibition.
It's policing for profit, which is just another vice of the war on drugs. The war on drugs, I repeat, is public enemy number one.
Absolutely. One more question for you. We talked about alcohol prohibition and different things that brought to society, how that's paralleled the war on drugs. One of the things that it hasn't paralleled that I think is interesting, the Volstead Amendment was passed in 1920. In 1919, they had to pass a constitutional amendment to give the government the authority to prohibit something, because everybody, congressmen, senators, president, citizens, everyone realized that the federal government had no power to prohibit the possession and use of anything. So they needed a particular amendment to the Constitution. But since that happened, we have now taken the position that everything is prohibited unless expressly permitted. Could you kind of speak to that as a prosecutor? I mean, where did we lose our way in terms of respect for law and respect for a Constitution when we don't have to have an amendment to prohibit things?
Well, they're trying to justify Congress's authority to put in place the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 by relying on the Commerce Clause. And then they're also trying to use the United States Constitution as a supreme law of the land when it's in conflict with state law. So, I mean, the government is doing things to try to justify this drug war, which it has decided it wanted to fight. And it wanted to fight it because to the politicians, prohibition means votes. To the drug cartels, means money. To the good guys who are supposed to be opposed to the cartels and the drug gangs, it means money. And the consequence of that is we've got police dressed up like they're in the military, smashing through front doors to rush in and get the drugs before they're flushed down the toilet, shooting the dogs on the way in as may or may not be necessary, people being hurt, sometimes the wrong house. A man's home being the castle, a rule of anachronistic value under this war on drugs scenario, civil rights, stop and frisk laws, drugs sniffing the car, the person, or the door of the house is no longer a search. We have eroded the Bill of Rights. We have displaced morality in the Golden Rule. We have filled the prisons, closed the schools, or defunded the schools. We have a healthcare epidemic where we can't pay for healthcare, yet we encourage kids to join the drug business, shoot each other with bullet holes that are uninsured, with the bills going to the public. We've made our communities violent. We can have safe streets or drug prohibition, and the people mistakenly for a long time have asked for drug war. It's time that they demand, as they are through these referendums, demanding an end to the war on drugs, demanding an end to public enemy, number one, and LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition at leap.cc, is helping us get there sooner.
Yes, you certainly are. I really appreciate your integrity and those people who are working with you at LEAP. I mean, it's really refreshing to hear somebody that hasn't been corrupted by the war on drugs and by prohibition. All of you there, you've seen it, and you've had the integrity to speak out against it instead of being co-opted by it, and I really appreciate that. I think all of us do, and you can teach us all a lot. So that's leap.cc. Thank you very much, Mr. Gierach. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And if you'd like to help us get the word out about the war on drugs, about all kinds of corruption and globalist eugenicists, and please support us at prisonplanet.tv. Your subscription there helps to support our operation. One subscription can be used by multiple people, so it's a really effective tool for getting the word out. Well, that's it for tonight's Nightly News. We'll be back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I'm David Knight.